Would you give up what you love most if God asked you to? This was Abraham's agonizing test of faith, a story so profound it still echoes across centuries. How could anyone endure such a demand? Let's unravel this pivotal moment in the sweeping plains of Aram, where the sky melts into the earth in a riot of dawn and dusk. Abraham's life had been one of quiet routines, anchored by family and home. But everything shattered when a voice, both terrifying and divine, pierced the silence. It carried a sacred covenant: "Leave your land, your kin, your father's house, and go to the land I will reveal." With it came a vision, descendants as countless as the stars, a nation forged from his bloodline. Standing at the crossroads of obedience and unthinkable loss, Abraham faced a destiny that would redefine faith itself. Faith, that mysterious and unshakable bond between man and the divine, began to flourish in Abram's heart as the promise of descendants like the stars took hold. A newfound conviction stirred him to obey. With each preparation, every tent folded, every jug sealed, he felt the colossal weight of his choice. To leave was to sever himself from all he cherished. Yet the pull of the unseen was irresistible. As Abram's caravan departed Aram, the desert sands shifted silently beneath their feet, each grain a silent witness to the first steps of a journey that would alter history. Canaan loomed ahead, not merely new terrain, but the birthplace of an eternal covenant. The vast skies arched overhead like a divine seal as he crossed into the unknown. The ground he now trod was more than soil, it was the theater of a promise where heaven and earth would collide. Among the oaks of Moreh, God appeared again, his voice weaving through the branches: "To your offspring I give this land." The wind seemed to whisper the words back, etching them into the air. Yet Canaan's milk and honey came laced with thorns. The land was already crowded with nations, their conflicts simmering. Then came famine, sharp as a blade, driving Abram to Egypt for survival. In Egypt, fear twisted his morals. He concealed Sarah's identity, spinning lies that entangled them in Pharaoh's court. But divine fingers intervened. They emerged unscathed, laden with gifts, yet marked by the ordeal. Their return to Canaan was a return to the promise, but also to its cruelest paradox. Sarah remained barren, her womb silent beneath a sky that pledged countless heirs. Her patience, worn thin as old parchment, snapped. In an act of bitter hope, she offered Hagar, her Egyptian maid, to Abram. The union bore Ishmael, a joy that came barbed with strife. Here was a son, yet not the son, a promise both kept and broken. The household's peace frayed as rivalry took root. Yet in this turmoil, God spoke again, not to rebuke but to deepen the covenant. The promise would stretch beyond human schemes, into realms where only faith could tread. As twilight stretched its shadows across the land, the Almighty appeared once more to Abraham in a visitation that would alter eternity. In this supernatural encounter, Abram's identity was forever changed to Abraham, father of multitudes, while Sarah was destined to become mother of nations. The covenant promise crystallized. She would bear Isaac, the child of miracle, securing their sacred bond with God. This profound commitment was physically etched into flesh through circumcision, an enduring mark upon Abraham's household, a permanent reminder that faith must remain as unwavering as these bodily signs. When angelic messengers later announced Isaac's impending birth, Sarah's initial laughter of disbelief transformed into awestruck wonder. The impossible had become inevitable through divine power. At daybreak on the appointed morning, the promised child arrived. Sarah's skeptical chuckle became tears of joy as she held Isaac, while centenarian Abraham marveled at this living testament to God's faithfulness. Their encampment buzzed with newborn energy, though beneath the celebrations tension simmered. Ishmael, Abraham's firstborn through Hagar, found himself displaced by this air of promise, a reminder that sacred blessings often unfold amidst human complexity. Yet greater trials loomed. One ordinary dawn, a familiar voice spoke words that would shake Abraham's soul, a request so unthinkable it threatened everything he held dear. This ultimate test would demand surrender beyond imagination, forging faith through fire in the crucible of obedience. The covenant, now established, was about to be refined in ways none could foresee. God demanded the unthinkable. Abraham must sacrifice Isaac, his promised son, as an offering on a distant mountain. Though devastated, Abraham rose at dawn, saddling his donkey, splitting wood for the pyre, and beginning the grim journey in heavy silence. Isaac, unaware of his fate, walked beside his father. "We have wood and fire," the boy asked, "but where is the sacrifice?" Abraham's voice nearly broke. "God will provide, my son." At the mountaintop, Abraham built the altar with shaking hands. Each log placed was a piece of his heart torn away. When he bound Isaac and raised the knife, the blade caught the sun, a flash of obedience amidst unbearable pain. Yet in that moment of absolute surrender, as faith and despair collided, divine intervention erupted. The story pivoted violently, unveiling the true nature of the God Abraham served. Just as the knife trembled in the air, a voice shattered the silence of Moriah. The sky seemed to tear open in a burst of light. At the very moment Abraham's knife descended toward his son, a powerful voice echoed from the heavens. "Abraham! Abraham!" It was the angel of the Lord. His voice thundered through the silence, breaking the most intense moment of Abraham's life. "Do not lay a hand on the boy. Do not harm him. Now I know that you fear God, because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son." Abraham froze. Tears streamed down his weathered face. His heart, moments ago shattered by the pain of obedience, was now overwhelmed by a relief so profound it left him trembling. With shaking hands he lowered the knife. He turned to look at Isaac, still lying on the altar, confused, frightened, but alive. And then, Abraham's eyes caught sight of something nearby. Caught in a thicket by its horns was a ram, a divine provision, a heavenly answer. Without hesitation, Abraham untied his son and offered the ram as a sacrifice in Isaac's place. That moment was not just a rescue, it was a symbol, a sign of substitution, a foreshadowing of redemption. And right there, on that mountain, Abraham gave that place a new name: "The Lord will provide." It was a mark, a reminder for generations to come that God is faithful, and He always provides for His people. Father and son descended the mountain together, but they were no longer the same. Between them now existed a bond, deeper than blood, forged in the fire of an unforgettable experience with God. Time passed. Life returned to its quiet routine, until reality struck once again. Sarah, Abraham's beloved wife, the woman who had walked beside him through every step of their journey of faith, breathed her last in Kiriath Arba, that is, Hebron. Abraham mourned deeply. He wasn't just burying his wife, he was saying goodbye to the companion of a lifetime. To honor her memory, Abraham sought to buy a worthy place for her burial. He approached the Hittites, the people of that land, and with respect and integrity negotiated the purchase of the cave of Machpelah. But that act was more than a farewell. It was the silent fulfillment of a promise. It was the first piece of land Abraham would ever own in Canaan, the land God had promised to his descendants. Sarah was buried there, and that place would become sacred for the generations that would follow. Yet the story wasn't over. Abraham knew that the future of God's promise now rested in the hands of Isaac. His son needed a wife, a woman who shared the same faith, the same values that had carried their family through every trial. So Abraham called for his oldest and most trusted servant, the man who managed all his possessions, and made him swear a sacred oath: "You will not choose a wife for my son from among the women of Canaan." And so began a new journey, a mission that was not just about marriage, but about preserving a legacy, about continuing the divine plan. Instead of choosing a wife for Isaac from among the Canaanites, Abraham instructed his servant to return to his homeland, to the city of his brother Nahor. There, the servant was to find a woman who shared not only Abraham's bloodline but also his values, his faith, and his devotion to the God who had guided him through a lifetime of promises and trials. And so, with blessings upon him and gifts in hand, the servant set out. He crossed deserts and mountains, driven not by sight but by faith, faith in the same God who had led his master through every unknown path. As the sun began to set and shadows stretched across the city of Nahor, the servant arrived at a well, a sacred meeting place of strangers and stories. And there, in quiet prayer, he asked for a sign. "Let the woman destined for Isaac not only offer me water," he prayed, "but also offer to water my camels." It was a test, not of beauty or status, but of heart, of kindness, of generosity. And it wasn't long before Rebekah appeared. Carrying a jar upon her shoulder, she approached the well with grace. Without knowing the servant's request, she offered him water, and then, with a heart full of hospitality, she tended to his camels as well. In that moment, the servant knew this was no coincidence. This was the answer to his prayer. Rebekah was not only the fulfillment of Abraham's hope, but the key to the unfolding of God's promise. Guided by providence, the servant shared his mission with Rebekah and her family. He told them of Abraham's oath and of every event that had led him to their doorstep. Seeing God's hand in these things, Rebekah's family agreed to the marriage, and Rebekah, with courage in her heart, chose to leave her home behind to become part of a greater destiny. Together, the servant and Rebekah journeyed back to Canaan. As they approached, Isaac was alone in the fields, meditating at dusk. He lifted his eyes and saw the camels in the distance. And when Rebekah saw him, she dismounted, covering herself with a veil, a gesture of reverence and humility. Their meeting was quiet, beautiful, and sacred. In Rebekah, Isaac found not only a wife, but comfort after the loss of his mother, Sarah. Their union became a symbol of the continuation of Abraham's covenant, a love story written under the same stars that once shined over God's promises. With Isaac and Rebekah together, Abraham could finally look upon his life with peace. His faith had not been in vain. His lineage was secured, and the story of his descendants was only beginning. As the years passed, children were born, each one a living testimony of God's unfolding promise. Abraham, now aged and wise, managed his legacy with care. He established Isaac as his principal heir, the bearer of the covenant. But he did not forget his other sons. With wisdom and foresight, he gave them gifts and sent them eastward, allowing them to form their own nations, avoiding future conflict and ensuring peace for Isaac's line. In doing so, Abraham not only trusted God's promise, he worked to preserve it, to protect it, and to prepare the way for future generations. His decisions shaped the destiny of tribes and peoples far beyond his lifetime. His faith became more than personal, it became a legacy, one that would echo through history. In the final chapter of Abraham's life, surrounded by a family that had grown vast and diverse, he looked back on his extraordinary journey, from a man without children, called to leave everything behind, to the patriarch of a nation chosen by God. His story had become a living testament to the power of faith, perseverance, and divine promise. When his final day arrived, Abraham departed this world at a good old age, fulfilled, at peace, and certain that his legacy would endure long after him. He left behind a family blessed by God, each generation carrying within them the spark of faith and courage that had guided his own steps. Isaac and Ishmael, once distant brothers separated by life circumstances, came together to bury their father beside Sarah, in the cave of Machpelah. It was a moment of reconciliation and respect, a powerful gesture that showed unity beyond past conflicts, sealing not only the end of a life but the eternal bond of family and destiny. And so, under the same earth where Abraham and Sarah rested, a new chapter was about to begin. For through Isaac and Rebekah, who now carried in her womb the promise of a future generation, the story would go on. Twins were to be born. Sons who would inherit not only their grandfather's legacy but also his challenges, destined to continue the story of faith, struggle, and divine purpose. The life of Abraham was never about a destination, it was about the journey. A journey marked by trials, by impossible decisions, by the courage to obey even when reason failed. From the moment he heard God's voice in the distant land of Aram, to the last sunset of his days in Canaan, Abraham walked with unwavering trust. He left everything behind without knowing where he was going. He believed in promises that seemed humanly impossible. He even raised the knife over his beloved son Isaac, trusting that the same God who gave the promise would provide the answer. His story teaches us that faith is not just belief, it is action. It is trust in motion. It is walking forward even when the road disappears beneath your feet. The legacy of Abraham is not simply about blessings and rewards, it is about courage, obedience, and living a life anchored in divine purpose. And this story is not over. It continues in each of us, in every step we take guided by faith, in every challenge we face with courage, and in every promise we hold on to, even when the world around us seems to say otherwise. If this story of Abraham inspired you, if it moved your heart, don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. And of course, subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next incredible story of faith, courage, and hope. Together, let's continue exploring the powerful lessons that the Bible has for us, because the journey of faith never ends.